Alright.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ramblemancy. This is the. I don't remember how we start these things.
Beginning.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ramblemancy. We're doing a free range ramble tonight, which means anything and everything will be discussed here.
All the
Literally
time.
everything.
No,
We're
just
going to be
kidding.
discussing everything. So, John, I hope you have a topic for literally everything in the world. So
Yeah, actually, I've got. If we flip through my little notebook on my desk,
man,
I've got.
your handwriting must be really small if you manage to fit like a question for about everything in that little thing.
Actually, this is just the table of contents. I have 12 more legal pads.
There's such a thing as a book of holding.
A book.
It's
book of
endless.
holding.
Just an endless all of everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think you literally just described the never-ending story. So, anyway.
Oh, you're right.
So, welcome everybody to today's episode of Ramblemancy. Like I said, we're doing a bit of a free range ramble here, and yes, I see odds there saying I'm here for the spicy announcements. They're spicy, right? I'd say they're like, on a scale of 1 to 5, they're like about a 3 in spice, a level 3 of spice. So, like, the kind where if you order them at a restaurant, like, you'll still get a little bit of side-eye, but, like, you're not going to be judged as hard, by the... Sorry, I've been eating a lot of Thai food recently. I've been ordering a lot of Thai food recently. Anyway, yeah, so... But, yeah, there are some medium spicy announcements. But yeah, Ike, hello, Odds, hi, Newly Human, hello, welcome on in, everybody. So yeah, we do have some announcements. First of all, as far as hello, I see a Danny in the chat as well.
Yay.
So first of all, as far as our progress in Tomorrow is Dead season 2, we are trucking right along. We had a few snags with some like tech issues and illnesses and just general not being around.
I think the exact words that Scriv used to describe her condition last week were "I am full of snot and despair."
That's yes. Just a little goblin running around in the background, the wine goblin in the background.
Good command for that.
Yeah, we got a command. We got a command about that.
We sure do. So
courtesy of Matt.
Let's see. There's also. Sorry, I'm watching this play out next to me. Don't worry about it. Just Cole trying to uncork a bottle. No. It's fine. We don't need to. And then forgetting that I have an open mic. To continue with the announcements, we're back on track, which brings us to our the specific medium spicy announcement that we were talking about. I hope this is the right button. We actually have an air date finally for Tomorrow is Dead season 2, and that air date.
Habam! Tomorrow is Dead, coming to you on October 18th, a Wednesday. Tomorrow is Dead will be airing Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, starting in 2 weeks? About 2 weeks. About 2 weeks on the 18th of October. So if you want to catch season 2 of our amazing zombie-themed actual play, A Story from the End of the World, you know exactly when and where to find it. So yeah, swing by then. We will be airing as consistently as the holidays will allow. We know that is coming up, so there'll probably be some breaks in the airing schedule to accommodate for any recording, or mostly just because people will be Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Yeah,
but we wanted to get it going in time for spooky.
Exactly. So we figured we also buy ourselves a couple of weeks of recording time as well by starting in the middle of spooky month, seeing as how there's no way that we're gonna run the whole season in October, so there's no reason to start at the very beginning of it. So, yeah. Hi, Matt. Good to see you. Hello.
Matt, I literally just used a command that you made the other day, because we had a cool sighting. Except no, we didn't.
But yeah, so
no, wait.
So yeah, that's the big announcement is that on Wednesday, October 18th at 6 p. Did we decide time? Did we say 6 p.m.?
Yeah, I think 6 p.m.
Yeah.
6 p.m. Pacific time. Tomorrow is Dead season 2 will air its first episode, and I'm very excited about this. That's so. That was a loud pour. This is a wine pouring ASMR stream now.
Matt is right.
Perfect.
I don't think that chair is new, but it does look very comfy.
Yeah, it's not a new chair at all. It's been there for a while. It's actually been here every episode of Ramblemancy since the renovation, pretty much.
That's
But
true.
yeah, so well, sometimes I've moved it to the side, but it can't be over there anymore because now there's a shelf over there. Anyway,
Solutions.
So that's kind of our big announcement, really. But we do have additionally another announcement. So not literally at this moment because I haven't. It's still hidden in the store. But we also going to celebrate our second season of Tomorrow Is Dead. We have some new merch in the store. We have Tomorrow Is Dead collage tees in the store right now, designed by the one and only Brita Donnan. They are full of a bunch of like items from the characters from season 1, as well as some little Easter eggs and things like that. I'm very excited about this shirt. We've been talking about it literally since season 1. Unfortunately, by the time we were talking about it, like the season was basically over already, so we couldn't really do anything about it. But yeah, as soon as we started talking about season 2, we got Bree on the design for that. So yeah, we've got we have a merch. We have new merch. It's not currently available, but it will be available after tonight's stream. So yeah, it'll be available after tonight's stream. But yeah, it'll be there. It'll be available in the store, the merch store. Also currently available in the merch store is all of our other merch, as per usual.
Everything else is still there, and you can get a lovely little coffee mug.
I still have the classic one. I have the original
Yeah,
one still.
you've got a relic.
There's that's right. You have the original design. Also,
Yeah.
Hello, it's Jade Bender. Jade, hello.
Yay.
I've played with the idea because one of the things that you can put in our store, one of the things you can do is like one of the color changing temperature mugs, and I have played with the idea of doing that, but I haven't found a way of doing it that it's like in order to make it worthwhile and affordable for you, there is no way that I can make it beneficial for us, and so I just haven't done it. But maybe I'll put it in. Maybe I'll do that. But at some point,
Get in there.
yeah. Twitch is being mean to. Yeah, Twitch is kind of being mean to everybody these last few weeks. So it's good to know it's not just the tech issues.
The tech issues have been wild.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks. Also, what's the subject for chat today? It's a free range ramble, so like whatever you have on your mind, chat, whatever burning questions occupy your mind, Baldur's Gate 3 related or not, you are welcome to ask.
Gee, I wonder where John's brain rot is currently.
I know how many people in our Twitch chat are also. I know that Danny recently also picked up Baldur's Gate 3. You know, Karlak, my wife.
Excellent.
I'm playing right now.
Yep. I was continuing my evil playthrough right before stream, and it's a whole thing. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Oh
Nobody's
God,
fine.
Man, I forgot about that gift. Thank you so much for reminding me of its existence. It's a free range ramble.
Oh my God! I forgot about that one. Anyway,
But the internet will not. That's the blessing and the curse.
That is the joy of being a content creator, is that when you say clippy shit, people gif you, and it exists forever.
It's true.
That is true.
Okay, well, I mean, as I said, so those were our big announcements. October 18th, 6 p.m. Pacific time, tomorrow's Dead Season 2 airs its first episode, and also we've got merch. It's very cool. That's the announcement. That's
and the original merch too.
The original merch, yeah, and yeah, that's all there. So, yeah, John, what do you got for us?
That's an interesting question, because, given that I've spent most of today playing Baldur's Gate 3 instead of thinking about anything, really to avoid having a single thought, I have instead been looking at Shadowheart. So, I was...
Hell yeah.
I did have half a thought earlier in the kitchen, though, when I was making dinner, and I was like, you know, this is something that we were talking about the other night in Discord. And Freeman, I remember you being there for that. I think we were talking about it at a recording session, actually, for Tomorrow is Dead, which is learning curves. Yeah. And like a lot of people are already like in that game are already familiar with like CRPGs and stuff like that. But I am having my first like 10 or so hours of playing Baldur's Gate have been rough. I don't know about you, Freeman.
Yeah, getting the hang of certain parts, but yeah, definitely not the thing I was, not the style of gameplay that I went into when I started playing video games the very first time. And, but you know what? I can get past that just fine as long as I'm playing with like other folks, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I still like it well enough, but the learning curve, you're not wrong. It slapped me around a few times, threw me over its shoulder, and then dumped me out and resurrected me and killed me again.
Yeah. It's just D&D, but in my computer with bad camera controls. That's, I think, my biggest complaint about the game. Really, is the just sometimes the cameras are doing things that you didn't ask them to do, and you don't help you at all. So,
yeah, and like what I'll say is that it's also teaching me how much about D&D I actually don't know. I feel like I am walking away from playing Baldur's Gate 3 better able to design D&D modules.
It's so
if I'm
funny.
being perfectly honest.
So many people. I've heard that commentary from a lot of people, from like other content creators who are talking about Baldur's Gate, and like other friends of mine who are playing it. Like, I have heard that exact thing where they're like, I feel like it's making me a better DM, or I feel like it's making me better at playing whatever. And that's so funny. That's really interesting.
Yeah, like it's not. I don't think like the pacing wise or like storytelling. Like it's not really like that aspect of it so much as it is just like, oh, I understand how I'm supposed to pace the resource management of Dungeons and Dragons now, right?
Yeah.
With the understanding that my characters can short rest multiple times in a day and get like a lot of gas back. Like I should be throwing a lot more skill checks with variable DCs at them, and I should be throwing really, truly just a lot more small encounters at them.
I think we're going to start seeing a under 10 DC revival in D&D. Because I feel like prior to this, I never set... That's not true. I was going to say I never set DCs under like 12, but that's not actually true. I definitely have. But yeah. But I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot of that. One of my good friends who was playing it recently said to me that like he's like, yeah, it fully changed how my approach to setting DCs. So yeah, the 2 DC crit fail or win. Yeah, absolutely. Ike said, learning curves is super relevant to me lately because I've been replaying Destiny 2 content I first played when I got back into the game earlier this year. And back then I had such a hard time, but for veteran players, I can see why they say, oh, it's so easy, just do XYZ. It's true. And I feel like I see this, I've seen it in in Baldur's Gate, in Pathfinder, the Pathfinder games, Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous, more Wrath of the Righteous than in Kingmaker, but because Kingmaker is a pretty brutal and unforgiving game, whereas Wrath of the Righteous I think is slightly less so. But one of the things that I've seen is like my first time through something in all of those games, I run through it and it's just like a slog. Like there's a combat that's like just such a hard time. I barely survive. I'm like eking out a win. And then my second time through, after having played the game into higher levels, you'd think, like, intuitively, you'd think that when you come back to level 1 after being used to playing at like high levels, that you'll be somehow worse because you don't remember how to play. But actually, what I've found is that I find that my second time through, I just breeze through things that were so hard for me early on. And so, like, that's very much like what Ike is saying here, that, like, you know, on some level, you're, you know, like, watching John play or watching other people play who haven't played before, and watching them do these things and struggle with certain fights. I'm like, oh, this one's so easy. You just gotta, but it's not, because, like, I was watching Matt Colville stream it the other day. Remember I was telling you about this, John? I was watching Matt Colville stream Baldur's Gate the other day, and I watched him do a fight, which, granted, he was probably a little lower level than I would be if I were to attempt it, but if I found myself there at the level that he was at, I probably could have handled it. But I've played it all so much already that I think I could do it. But watching him, I could see the exact, like, mistakes that he was making and not, like, maximizing the use of his action economy in the in the turn order, like using your bonus actions literally no matter what, like whether you have something useful or not, just using it is always going to be more beneficial than not doing
all the
it
time.
And so, like, that kind of stuff. But, like, it was not like, I'm not sitting there going like, oh, fucking get good, scrub. I'm sitting there going like, oh, I see the difference between somebody who's played this a lot and somebody who is brand new to it, you know? And it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and, like, I literally today, in a similar vein, Luke, in the same combat, Lucas was like, oh yeah, no, you started this combat from a really, like, strategically advantageous position. I was like, hell yeah. And then in the same fight, Lucas watched me click Searing Smite for one of my characters and then click a fucking floorboard and absolutely obliterate a floorboard instead of the guy I wanted to smite. So, like, you know, there's like a very real, I literally, like, on the one hand, I have a pretty good, like, strategic brain for, like, figuring out, okay, so, like, Will has agonizing blast, which will knock enemy, or no, that's has like repellent blast or whatever it's called, that'll, like, knock people off. So if I position here, I can use them to like throw people off of cliffs and shit, and that'll be great. But then, like, literally using the UI of the game, because I've never played a game in this style since, like, the original Xbox, maybe. I'm just lost sometimes.
Yeah. Ike says, yeah, it solidified my stance that you should always be patient and nicer to new players. I love coming across new players now, even if sometimes I get a little frustrated going, come on, just do this. You didn't do it. Grr. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if for clarity, the Guardian ranks in Destiny go 1 to 11, and, like, everything after, you reset to 7 if you're above it every season. And that's just kind of a mark of, like, yeah, you're there's, like, they're essentially just, like, vanity ranks after that. But if I see some, like, rank 10, 11 motherfucker who's done all of the raids in the game and has a zillion exotics, and you're not doing the mechanics for a baby strike, I'm like, all right, buddy, come on.
That looks like somebody who gained all of their experience from brute forcing their way through every problem.
But like Ike said, you know, if I see somebody in there who's like a kindergarten, who's like a level 2 or 3 guardian, and I'm like, okay, all right, buddy, I'm gonna bounce up and down in front of you with whatever the thing, the MacGuffin that you're, the big glowing ball that you're supposed to dunk in. I'm gonna drop it right in front of you, and then I'm gonna walk you over to the objective.
All right, and after snack, we wash our hands.
All right, and after the third ball, that's the DPS phase. Make sure you wash your hands before you use your super.
brute forcing through every problem at me. Honestly, Newly Human, same. It's one of the reasons why I've always hated raiding in MMOs, because there's mechanics, and I am like mechanics averse in MMOs and stuff like that, in raids and boss mechanics. I'm just like, hey, there's a boss. I'm going to stand next to him and hit him a bunch. It's like, don't stand there. Why not? Do you not see the big glowy red circle? No. And that's,
I'm way over here because I spent an hour brute forcing my way through a combat encounter in Baldur's Gate before Ramblemancy.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I'm the same way. Mechanics blind. It's time for the water fountain tribute.
Yeah, and I will say, like, about Destiny, like, the learning curve for that game, it's such an, like, as first person shooters go, it's kind of weird, because it really is just a first person MMO with platforming. Like, if you told me that you had a first person shooter with like raid MMO, like raid level MMO stuff going on, and like those kind of mechanics, and also it was a platformer, I would look at you kind of funny. That's literally what Destiny is. And so I think those are it's. I don't know of any other games that are quite like it. So it's just like I think there's things that you like are not used to doing in shooters.
Once again, I feel very seen by Newly Human, because that's exactly how I am too. Like, it's wild because in D&D I'm all about mechanics, but in video games I cannot be bothered to learn more than 2 button prompts. Absolutely, I'm the same way. Yeah, yeah. Cole off camera going, me too. Like, that's just like, yeah. I don't know what it is. Like, I am all about mechanics. And I think it goes back to that conversation we had a few weeks ago about, like, mechanics in video games and how they're hidden, right? How mechanics are hidden. If they were less hidden and less arcane in video games, maybe I would care a little bit, right? Like, maybe I'd be like, oh, I want to figure this out. But it just feels pointless most of the time because they're always hidden anyway. So my only job is to, like, input the numbers, by like getting better equipment or getting whatever, right? That's my only job, and I don't know what the actual formulas are or what the processes are, so I'm just, Actually, that brings me to an interesting point, because I've seen this topic discussed, and since we're talking about, right now, we're talking about this line between, TTRPGs and video games, I am curious what you all think, chat, you two, I am curious about what you all think about the idea that D&D Beyond is especially with its future plans, right? That D&D Beyond is, I can't think of a better way to say it other than like, and I don't mean this to sound as derogatory as it does, and I don't mean it that way at all, but I can't think of a better way to say it right now. But D&D Beyond is basically like dumbing down players' in understanding of mechanics.
Or it's like it's obscuring them, basically.
It's obscuring them so they don't have to learn them. And then
interesting,
which is fine as long as I think personally it's fine as long as, but I think it's very limiting, because as long as you are doing exactly what the rules specify you can do, and you aren't trying to do anything weird, then it works. But there are times when it pays to know how that number appeared on your sheet, like what numbers went into that sheet, or what factors went into the number on the sheet, so you can reverse engineer it from, like, and I'm talking in game. I'm not talking about like weird like edge case kind of shit. I'm talking about like in game during normal course of play. There are situations where it can be useful to reverse engineer where your numbers are coming from. But yeah,
it's one of those things that I think like it's a weird balance to strike between accessibility and like being able to understand the game that you're playing. Like where on the one hand you want to make it easier for people to pick up your game and play it, but on the other hand you are kind of like funneling them into like a more like constricted kind of play experience. So
yeah. So I guess, sorry, to be clear, my question was basically, because I realized I started like answering my question immediately after asking it, but my question is, what do you all think about this idea that D&D Beyond and its plans for the future, for like what it's going to look like in the future, are basically making players less rules aware, less mechanics aware about the game that they're playing. Because this is a take that I've heard a lot recently, being discussed specifically in regards to D&D Beyond, but also how I saw an interesting take recently about how Baldur's Gate is kind of doing the opposite, which is actually giving players a better understanding of the mechanics, but I'm not sure I agree with that one, but that's a different thing. So
it's making them more apparent while it's doing them for you, which I think is pretty neat, right? Baldur's Gate kind of does that, kind of does a lot of that for you, but it does also put the things in front of you. But I think like Newly Human and what Ike said, like one of Ike's first comments today are both things I'm thinking about here, because Newly Human said maybe it is, but honestly fine. So many people are scared off of D&D by the character sheet. It's good to know why the numbers do what they do, but not everyone is as in love with spreadsheets as I am, and that's fine too. I can do mechanics for my entire table. I do it anyway. And like the other thing that Ike said earlier was I think about, I'm gonna scroll back up. Yeah, because he was talking about learning curves in Destiny, where he said, I first played when I got back into the game earlier this year, and then like playing old content. And he said, but for veteran player, like content that he had a hard time with before, but now that he does less because he's been playing more. And with some people who've played a bunch too. And so it's easy for him to see now how veteran players will look at newer players and be like, oh yeah, just do XYZ thing. Like, so I think basically what I'm getting at here is that's kind of, I think those are interesting answers in this context, is that it's easy for people like us who have played a shitload of D&D for a lot of years, to like have this concern about, yeah, is this obscuring the mechanics of the game? But it might be a good thing for people at the entry level. I don't know. I think
it could be, but I think my argument is that maybe if the mechanics of your game are scaring off players, maybe you need to redesign them.
Listen, I wasn't gonna start firing off game design hot takes.
Listen,
but,
like
I had that thought at the.
And this is coming from me, somebody who is like very much not about rules light TTRPGs. I'm not a fan of rules light TTRPGs. So, but like if it's that big of a problem that it is actively scaring off new players, maybe they're just not that good. Maybe they need to be designed better. I don't know. And I'm not sure what I know what that looks like, because you know me. I think the way that I like to play TTRPGs, I like a good crunchy TTRPG. But I still like elegance in design. I don't like a bunch of clunky random numbers that need to be thrown in and all accounted for separately in every single time. Like, I hate that shit. But I do like it when there's a bunch of different knobs and dials to turn, as it were, in your characters. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like not necessarily. I was grabbing the Morkborg manual to look at some of the character creation stuff for that, so I checked myself before I wrecked myself, because Morkborg is one of the in like old school Renaissance games. That's what I was going to talk about. I think there is very much a reason for the renaissance of like old school like war game kind of RPG, is where, you know, there's a lot of indie designers that are doing cool stuff in this space too, but it is simplified, kind of streamlined, still crunchy,
right.
Still like kind of, you know, you are Dave the Barbarian and you have a +2 great axe and you have 12 health. You have 3 stats like this, and this. This one is for hit. This one is for health. This one is for smort. Like that, and that's kind of it. Like very simple. They tend towards like very high lethality, very straightforward gameplay.
+2 mop and mop bucket maybe, but I don't know about that.
+2 mop and mop bucket.
So. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to respond because there's some really interesting commentary down here. Um, I saw Ike said, I like doing math and having to run less systems, but at what point do we differentiate a video game and a TTRPG/board game? And I think that's a completely fair question to ask, because it sort of feels to me like what D&D Beyond is trying to do is to blur that line to such a degree that we kind of lose what we like about the TTRPG, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not obviously not approaching this from a purist standpoint, because like I kind of think that a purist standpoint is kind of nonsense in anything really. But I'm saying it in the sense that like at what point do you just say, well, I might as well, like, this is just playing a video game with more steps, right? Like
Yeah.
at this point I could just play a video game. And the other thing I saw Newly Human say, which I think I agree with, actually, and it's a very good point. Newly Human says, alternatively, I don't mean this in an asshole way. Maybe D&D specifically isn't for everyone. At least maybe not the best fit for everyone. And I think I agree with you. And I think what we're kind of talking around here is this sort of inherent tension between what is best as a TTRPG and capitalism pressures, the pressures of
Sure.
capitalism to appeal to the mass, to like mass appeal, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like,
and like
we saw it in video games too, like when video games started being catered to like the casual gamer, right? Because there were more casual gamers on average than like, hardcore people who are going to get deep into everything and whatever. Like, there's a lot more people, and I'm not saying casual gamers in any sort of derogatory way. I mean, literally the people who will like pop on for like a couple hours after work and then just sort of be like, all right, cool, I'm good, that's good for me, right? And like
Yeah.
are looking to turn their brains off and aren't looking to like get deep into a video game,
Somebody who loads up Destiny 2 and plays a couple of strikes, and that is the extent of their Destiny 2
Right.
experience of their week, and they have a great fucking time.
Yeah, we saw it. We saw it in video games. Like, I feel like we're starting to see the beginnings of it in D&D, not necessarily TTRPGs in general. Thank God, because I think in general, luckily, I think for most TTRPGs, I don't think we're in danger of seeing this become a trend, because I think for most TTRPGs, the companies literally lack the funds to like go in that direction.
This is interesting because I remember a round table from years, like maybe almost coming up. I feel like coming up on 10 years ago at this point. But it was a round table with like Jason Charles Miller and like Matt Mercer and Ivan Van Norman and a couple of people. I think back in like the Geek and Sundry era, where they were talking actually about how the length of tabletop role playing games was getting shorter. Like on average, and like people were designing games and shooting for lengths of games, whether it was produced or at home, and I think the question they were asking is like, what is the shortest?
To be clear, you're talking about like the actual sessions and not like not the game, but like the session. It's okay in like the actual gameplay. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, this is just kind of an extension of the notion of like the person, like the like diehard player versus the casual, like the more casual or like entry level player who's like, I want to see if I like this. And it's a lot easier to hand somebody a tabletop RPG and say this takes 90 minutes or 2 hours to play than it is to say, okay, we're going to spend this entire 4-hour game session setting up everyone's characters, and then next week on Wednesday we will play our first session.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, we've been talking a lot around the influence here of like, it's hard for Wizards of the Coast to just make a different game at this point, you know? Like,
yeah. The unfortunate issue that D&D specifically suffers from is edition bloat, which is to say that like they have a bunch of holdover stuff that they have to include in it, or else they'll get people yelling at them that like, this isn't D&D, this is blah, 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 right? But that serves no real purpose in the game.
Can you imagine if Chris Perkins walked up to the front of a press conference at Gen Con 2024 and said, D&D 1, or whatever they're calling it, D&D Next, whatever it's called, is a D6 dice pool system, and then just walked off the stage.
Oh,
It's a D6 dice pool system. Thank you for your time. I see the floor, and then
It just leaves.
oh,
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
it'd be worth it for the. Yeah.
Listen, I'm sure that Chris Perkins makes a perfectly cozy salary, but I would pay good money. I would pay good money for that press conference bit.
That would be amazing. Jade said D&D is absolutely not for everyone, and it's a shame that it's like the TTRPG that everyone points to when there's so much other lovely stuff out there that can lift so many other playing style or fit so many other playing styles. Yeah, I agree, and I think like it's a. Yeah, I absolutely agree, because I think not everybody who's coming to TTRPGs and not everybody who's interested, or even potentially might be interested in TTRPGs, will necessarily. Like, how many people? Like, I have to imagine that there are so many people who have bounced off of D&D who otherwise would have been really into TTRPGs and are like, I don't like it. I don't like TTRPGs as a whole, right?
Like the fucking thing is, like, I see this firsthand. Like, the last 2 years at Gen Con, I have been working the Possum Creek Games booth, and Possum Creek's like unofficial byline for a lot of their games is like, we make games for people who don't like tabletop role playing games.
Mm-hmm.
With that last bit in scare quotes, for who don't like tabletop role playing games. And the reality is they don't like D&D.
Right.
But somebody comes up to our booth and sees Sleepaway, or especially like Wanderhelm, a bunch of cute animals on the cover, and they're like, what is this? Is it a children's book? Is it an art book? Is it a game? And I'm like, yes to all of those things. But being like, yeah, this is like a slice of life tabletop RPG. It's very mechanics light. It's focused on like letting you have basically just a cozy storytelling session with your friends for a couple of hours. It's very easy for you to set up and play yourself. There's no number tracking. You just write down some character like traits that your character has and traits of the place that you're gonna, like, wow, that's really cool. And there's plenty of people out there for whom the wargaming simulationist kind of stuff is not really, no matter how you flavor it, no matter what spin you put on it, it's not really their speed. But there's tons of other stuff out there that is. Yeah. And it's just, I feel like it's just accessibility or availability of those things. It's sort of hard to find a lot of those games, even the more popular ones, like your Wanderhelm. Even like a company that's as big as like Monty Cook Games, I feel like a lot of people don't know what Cypher is.
Yeah. And as much as I like Cypher, I also don't think it's a good intro game, frankly. I don't think it's a good intro game to TTRPGs.
It's designed by someone who, in principle, by somebody who used to make D&D. And like, I'm not saying that it's like super simulationist like D&D is, but it is also quite crunchy.
Yeah.
Especially for the players, that might be a
it's definitely
as well too.
You're absolutely right. Like, it's definitely a very like, the mechanics are very player facing, and it makes it way harder on the players than like the players do a lot, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because in general the GM does so much more than the players do in any given session, or just even overall. So I don't think it's a bad thing to shift some of the weight. I just don't think that the answer was to shift all of the mechanical weight onto the players. I don't think that was the answer. I think that just distributing the weight a little bit more evenly across the board, and not like just, okay, well, the GM's responsible for the story and for running the game and refereeing and all that sort of stuff. The players, you guys got the mechanics. Like, I don't think that was the option. I don't think that was the way to go.
Weirdly, I feel like if you're a first-time GM, something like Cypher is genuinely like better for you, because if your players already know how to play Cypher, then you can just set numbers that aren't totally insane and they'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
Just set the vibes.
I saw Aphrodite. Hello. Hi. Good to see you. Says, oh boy, I had an experience where I played with some people that treated D&D like a video game, which was fun in some cases, but what really bothered me was how they all acted like it was a single player game. Yep. Everybody had a
Oh.
strong case of protagonitis. Um, and let's see, I think it was at this point I realized the game was not for everyone, but that's okay. Neither are video games or specific genres of books. That's why we have games in just about everything, or genres in just about everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Ike was talking
Mhm.
about it too. He said D&D is my introduction, but it's not my preference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Ike really likes sci-fi, and it's like something like Star Wars:
Mhm.
Edge of the Empire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, one of the things, and maybe this is cultural, maybe it's just like capitalism or whatever, but I feel like there's this presiding notion that we have today that everything that exists has to be friendly and welcoming and made for, that last one is specifically made for everyone. And I don't think that's true because I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to make something that appeals to everyone. And like this conversation I feel like is bordering on a different one that we've also had very recently that I'm going to bring up, not because I want to discuss it, mostly because I just want to like, you know, just reinforce what we talked about. But this idea that D&D does not offer a whole lot of support to the DMs, and what I mean, the reason that that's relevant here is because I think it is very possible for, is it possible for D&D to have something for everyone? Yes. I think it is possible for D&D to be D&D can have something that will be of interest to everyone. However, I think the an inordinate amount of that weight of making that happen is entirely on the DM and how they run their game and not inherent in the design or the mechanics of the system. So it is entirely on the DM to make sure that the people at their table are getting what they want out of the game, and there's no support whatsoever in the design of the system to facilitate that. It is purely on the DM, and as John knows firsthand because he's experienced it, what works for one table isn't going to necessarily work for another table, but more often than not a DM will find their style and run with that and do literally nothing else, and inevitably they'll run into a table where they run their style and that style is not for that table, and it is a
Mm-hmm.
disaster. John knows
It,
firsthand because I tried it. I happen to be the kind of person who learns from those kinds of experiences and goes, okay, what the fuck did I just do? How did we get here? And then kind of goes back and goes, oh, okay, I understand what happened, right? But not everybody's going to do that, and that's not like me saying like I think they should, but that's not me like making criticizing anybody. That's me saying like it's just a reality. Not everybody's going to do that. They'll find their style, they'll stick with what they're comfortable with, and they'll run the same thing for every table. So like, but their style isn't the only thing that can have an impact on the table, and that's where I think more support for a GM could be extremely helpful. But yeah, self-reflection
yeah.
in my TTRPGs pass. Yeah, exactly, Matt. Um, the face that Cole just made over me about that. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
yeah. Go ahead.
I will say that is something that I have noticed. It's something that I've noticed, I think, in a lot of kind of it's a game design trend that I've noticed where like games more and more now is like especially like indie kind of stuff are doing things that I feel like support both parties, like that put an equal number of tools in the game master's hands in terms of structuring a session,
Mm-hmm.
as they do in the players for impacting things moment to moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that I'm really pleased to see because I dislike the notion that a game master must be the font of like of knowledge or creativity or whatever from which all of the campaign's like principal momentum must flow.
Absolutely.
You have to like do all of the advanced prep and all of these other things, and the players just kind of like show up and do that. Like I don't, and it all kind of just comes from you, not really a lot of structure provided. Like, yeah, here's a bunch of like puzzle pieces. They belong to 13 different puzzles. Find some ones that fit together, I guess.
Yeah.
And
find some ones that weren't intended to fit together, but when you put them together, it makes I don't know how I didn't see that, but you're fucking right. That does. I'm just gonna go with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like now, figure out how you're gonna like trim and glue these together.
Yeah, and like it gets even worse when you add. I know this is not how the term the Matt Mercer effect is used, but it's my version of the Matt Mercer effect. So it's like the Matt Mercer effect 2. Electric Boogaloo. Anyway, it's the, and like, don't get me wrong, this is not a criticism of Matt Mercer. I understand why he does this, because Critical Role primarily is entertainment. It's not D&D. It's entertainment primarily. That's what it's for. It's entertainment media. Using the medium of D&D, but it's not D&D necessarily, right? Like, that's not the primary goal of that, of Critical Role. It's not, the primary goal of that is not playing a good game of D&D. So
it's to play an entertaining game of D&D.
Exactly, which we sort of touched on at the end of last Ramblemancy about like the difference between streamed games and offline non-streamed games. But what I refer to, my version of the Matt Mercer effect, is not the like, you have to copy, be Matt Mercer or else you're bad at running D&D. That's not what I'm talking about. What I refer to as the Matt Mercer effect is this idea that the DM is an island, right? Because if you even in back when Talks Machina was still a thing, you'd see a lot of that too whenever Matt was a guest, and he wasn't a guest very often, not as often as everybody else was, probably for that reason, because there's a very minimal amount of things that Matt could actually talk about, right? Because everything is behind the curtain, right? When Matt Mercer is running the game, everything is behind the curtain. The DM, the story, everything that happened, everything that could have happened, everything that, right? All of that stuff, all behind the curtain. The players are not part of that creative process, and there is a one-way flow of information from the DM to the players, right? And I think that for the purposes of an entertainment property, it makes perfect sense. I understand why that's there. For your home game, I think that's maybe less applicable, because you're not the only person at the table as the GM. You're not the only person who has ideas about what the story is going to be, and you're not the only person who should have a say in those things. And I see this, and I, myself included, at one point, but in a lot of like newer DMs where they feel like they have to be the be-all end-all of like creative energy in the game and the story and all this sort of stuff, and are reluctant to rely on their players and their players' input because it requires them to sort of open up and kind of give the players a peek behind the curtain sometimes. But sometimes you end up with disaster if you do not tell your players exactly what is happening and exactly what is likely to happen. You end up with a disaster and everybody feels terrible about it. And I'll give an example in a bit, but from one of my own games, but I feel like now I've talked for too long. So it's somebody else's turn. Say something else. God.
Well, I was going to bring up the example that I think you've mentioned before from our home game quite a few years ago, which is that like there was an arc that had we all had more experience playing games together, it would have been a thing where Lucas would have been like, hey guys, this isn't like a quest thing. I'm just like throwing some flavor down here, like above table. There's nothing to find there. Unless you really want to, in which case we should call the session here and I'll prepare something for next week. But like when you're so focused on the like, oh, I am the DM, I'm on an island, I have to make this work, or
I'll let
like
the consequences of their choices teach them. It's
Mm.
like, nope, stop. Sometimes you
Nope.
just got to tell your friends, hey guys, this wasn't a plot. You already decided what you were doing, and this is just extra information.
Mhm.
I'm just providing a little bit of flavor for the world around you, so it doesn't seem big and empty with only big quest markers in it. You know,
A little
um,
spice.
yeah. And but instead, like, we had a very like rough few sessions of D&D where like Lucas was out of sorts and we were out of sorts, and like it just like it was like we had an all right time, but it's not the best D&D we've ever played. And I think that kind of brings us a little bit back to our earlier thing that we were talking about, which is like skill diff, learning curves, right? Which is like
Yeah.
where we were at in the amount of experience that all of us had
Mhm.
playing the game, and remembering, in fact, that we were playing a game. The ability to like step back and be like, oh right, we should just say above table what's going on. That's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a thing that that's like anything else as a player, as a GM, something that you learn to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. I saw Ike said the group dynamic is huge when it comes to what everyone gets out of the game. Yes, absolutely. Um, I've had games ruined by people who want to purposely throw a wrench in the DM's plans or ones who min max the game as a priority rather than let everyone else play. Yeah. It's harmed friendships in the past. See, that's really rough when it gets to that point. That sucks, and I'm sorry that that happened. But yeah, like that is very true. Like, and actually, ironically, during that same instance that John was just talking about, I had one of our other friends. I had a conversation, long conversation with one of our other friends who was in that game, who was like, for the first time, made me think about how every player that comes to a D&D table or a TTRPG of any kind, really, comes to it for a different reason. Like they want to get something out of it, and maybe it'll coincide with what other players at the table want, but it doesn't always. It doesn't
Mhm.
always. And the most important thing I think that you can do as a GM is, and hell, even as a player, right? As like this one, oh, incredible player move, right? To understand what the other players at the table want to get out of the game and then figure out how to help them get there, right? That's what a good GM does, but it's also what a good actually, it's not even what a good player does. It's what a fucking incredible player does. Like
mhm.
it's what an incredible player does is figuring out like, oh, what is that person's that person clearly has an idea, like a strong idea of the fiction that they want to participate in right now. How can I as a fellow player help them achieve that? Fucking incredible. Like that is a big brain, a galaxy brain player move right there. Like that's very good. But like as a GM, especially, I feel like that's something that we don't often think about right away, and realize that like everybody who's there is there for a different reason, to get something else out of the game. And I'm not just talking about
Mm.
power fantasies, because like there is a certain amount of that too. But like power fantasies, I don't think are necessarily intrinsic to somebody's enjoyment of the game. But the thing that they are there, that they want to experience and get out of that experience of playing a TTRPG, that is literally the whole reason they're there. So like that's important. It's fundamental to their enjoyment at that table. So yeah.
Realized that my monitor had wound up just like a little bit tilted this way when I was like cleaning my desk today, and so just a whole lot more of this very dark side of my room was visible than normal.
Yeah. Newly Human says, I keep it as chill as I can, but I do sometimes feel at constant odds with my group per tone. I got I got us into a situation somewhat recently because we hadn't. I know you didn't put it in there, but I'm gonna read that as situation TM, because I feel like that's how it was meant. Into a situation somewhat recently because we hadn't done combat in more than a real world year. Ooh, that's rough, buddy. And I so badly wanted to use mechanics. Yeah, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? Like, some players might be perfectly happy with that kind of game. I don't think I'm one of those players, because, like, if I have mechanics, if I have things on my sheet, I want to use them. Like, I built my character to do a thing because I want to do that thing, you know? Like, if I built my character to hit like a truck, then you better put some things in front of me to hit, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But, like, some players are totally happy with going forever without combat, and that's fine. As long as everybody's expectations align, you know? Like, that's what matters there, you know?
Yeah, and that takes me back to, a recentish Dimension 20 season where, like, in A Court of Fey and Flowers, there was not a lot of combat, but then again, Abria Iyengar had also stapled Dungeons and Dragons to a really cool indie TTRPG whose name I cannot remember off the top of my head right now, but it's basically a simulator for like Pride and Prejudice, Regency era, like kind of romance, high society drama, and so that was a good portion of it, is that for swaths of that game they were fully playing a different game, except when it came to a couple of climactic battles and a couple of literal duels between characters because of the genre. But if that's the kind of game that you're sitting down to play, then, like, as long as everybody is all on the same page.
Absolutely.
Nearly Human says they had so many non-combat mechanics to engage with. Yes. And again, that's because Abria did a fantastic job of importing a whole bunch of non-combat mechanics from other games, because, as Lucas has been talking about, 5th edition does not have great tools to support its GMs, and Abria found a lot of those to support the style of game that she was running. Yeah. Really, it almost feels like 5e existed there for brand recognition more than anything.
Yeah. I saw Matt mention Stars and Wishes, which are an extremely important tool. It can be, anyway. I find they're less useful in a group that knows each other super well and has played together for a long time. But not that they're not useful in those still. It's just that I find that I need to use them less. But the tools, as Matt said, referring to Stars and Wishes, a TTRPG tool where at the end of the session the players give out stars, something someone did that you enjoyed. Or a fellow player had a brilliant idea, the GM blew your mind, etc. And then the players make wishes, what they want more / less of, or character moments, etc. I think that's a very useful tool for any table. My personal experience is that I found it is somewhat less useful at tables where I've been playing with the people for a long time, because I can usually figure out what they're going to say anyway. But it still is a worthwhile thing to have. I also saw Ike said, as an example of that, I was running a Star Wars game and included a very prominent canon character at the end of the first session, and it went all right. Not quite as I planned, I guess. Not all of the players had the same reverence for Star Wars as me. Oh, I'll keep reading, but like that hurt me. I understand that pain, where you were like, this cool thing happened. Isn't it cool that you're getting to interact? And they're like, yeah, that's pretty neat. And you're like, well, fuck me then, I guess. I understand.
No, you don't understand. You don't understand how cool this is.
I understand that pain. I feel you. So after the game, my friend came to me and said, "Pro tip: never include these characters because someone might try to kill them or something. And then what do you do as a DM?" Yeah, that is. I understand the point that was being that your friend was making. I am highly suspicious of any advice in TTRPGs that contains the words never and always, because all it takes is like one weird edge case to prove it wrong. And there are so many times where like well-known, well-respected GMs have said, never do this, it's bad, and then I do it and it works great. And vice versa, where people have said this will work, and then I do it and it just does not go over well at all. So like, I understand the point though, to which I would say there's any number of ways that you could handle that, which is either stopping the game and being like, hey guys, come on, play along, please. Like, you all know what game you're playing. You're playing Star Wars. You know this character can't die here. Please just, like, fucking play along. Or alternate universes are a thing. I when running TTRPGs and IPs, I come at it with the mindset that's like, yes, I understand what canon is, and I do my best to respect canon. However, the IP is there for me to play, and a TTRPG is there for me to play around in and make the stories that I want to make in it, and not to, like, prescribe the game that I play and run. So, like, maybe things happen that are not, like, it's, I think, separating what happens in canon in an IP and what you as the GM want to happen / not want to happen, I think is important in that respect. Just because, yeah. But your point is well made, and I agree with you. That's a shitty situation to find yourself in. Foot. Little
Foot.
goblin. A goblin makes an appearance.
No, you didn't.
Incredible.
I mentioned before that I was going to give an example from one of my own games about letting your players know what's going on. So John gave the bad version of this, like the one where I didn't do the thing that I should have done. I'm going to give you an example of a time when I did do the right thing, which is recently, earlier this year, we had the grand sort of epic finale of our years-long TTRPG, like D&D campaign. Right, the party was 20th level, and there was this, like, final battle. They had gone into this dead universe to restart the dead universe because if they didn't, then the rest of the multiverse would fall apart. So they basically had to, just level 20 things. Don't worry about it. Anyway, the point is that there was this huge battle that they had to fight their way to the center of this, like, dead universe. And they gathered all their allies from over the course of the whole campaign. They had NPCs and allied factions and all these sorts of people who they gathered together to fight against this existential threat. And there were a lot of important NPCs there, NPCs that were important in general and important to the party specifically. And I basically told them, like, there were a lot of deaths on the table is what was happening, right? This was the end game of a campaign, baby. Like, death is on the line now. It is a very real thing. Like, plot armor has gone out the window, basically. Like, we're here. It's do or die, literally. I designed it so that throughout there were a series of skill challenges followed by combats, and, succeeding on the skill challenges was going to result in combat anyway. It would just be like a slightly, like, less difficult combat. But there were also going to be several instances where things would happen, opportunities would present themselves where the players were forced to make a choice, where they could go and help out this group, or they could ignore this group during the battle and push straight ahead towards the end, right? And the consequences of these choices were, if they went to help the group that was struggling in this final battle, then their path to the final boss and the final sort of like this fate of the universe sort of situation they would find it a little more obstructed when they got there. Things would be a little more difficult. But if they ignored the group that needed help and went on, it was a guaranteed, note that I guaranteed, not a chance of, a guaranteed important NPC death. I had a whole spreadsheet of the important NPCs that were there, and I was going to randomly roll on that table. if they chose to ignore it. No die rolls or nothing. It just happened. Now, that sounds kind of shitty, except here's the thing. The thing that made it okay isn't the fact that I could justify it by saying, like, hey, this is the end game, high stakes and all that. That's not the thing that makes it okay. The thing that made it okay is that I told them right away, this is what will happen. Here are your choices, and here are the consequences of those choices. Now choose. And that's what made it okay, because now all of a sudden the players were very on board with making those choices, and when NPCs died, because they did, when it happened, it was the emotional, dramatic moment that it was supposed to be, and not like, oh, that sucks, that feels bad, like, we couldn't do anything, there was nothing that we could do, whatever, right? When you hide those kinds of things from your players, bad things are likely to happen. Maybe you'll luck out, and maybe you'll have a group of people at your table who like don't really care that much that you did that and didn't tell them about it, and they're just along for the ride, or maybe they're happy to go along with it. But why risk it? Right? Mm-hmm. Why risk that in what is supposed to be the epic sort of campaign finale? Right? Why force them to confront a feels bad situation when they should be focused on how epic and, you know, emotional this moment is? So yeah, anyway, that's John gave you the example of when I did the wrong thing, when I didn't tell the players the out of game information that they needed in order to not feel shitty. I'm giving you the way when I did it right.
Yeah, and like it benefits to talk about examples of both, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're like, oof, we didn't do this, and it went poorly for us, and then we did this, and it made it that much more impactful. And like Freeman played in that game, you can attest to the effect of that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. This just in, Lucas loves Mass Effect. Listen, I literally went into that leg of the campaign saying, I'm gonna make D&D Mass Effect 3 now. That was my entire design philosophy. And you were right. I was right. Thank you, Cole. Yes.
You were right.
And I'm gonna do it better.
Oh God. Yeah. That was my example of that. The fuck were we talking about?
We've just kind of been talking about skill diff in and like learning curves and you know, playing tabletop RPGs and that kind of stuff. So many problems with tabletop RPGs often come down to have you talked to each other about it?
Yeah. And
I like just, you know, a small thing to double back on Lucas's kind of definition of the Mercer effect. In that the GM is an island, I think the other like effect of that is oftentimes like people don't want to break the narrative flow of the game.
Yeah.
Which like
my immersion.
Again, when you are playing, I'm not saying it's not important. We'll get to that in a minute. But like when you're playing for entertainment,
that was a little bit terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. It's like what happens when like a wild animal gets stuck in a place that they weren't expecting to be. It's like the scrabbling sound. That's what it sounded like behind me.
Like I'm just imagining that gif of like the guy gently lifting a like panicked deer fawn out of a pool and then just boom right back in.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Anyway, continue. Don't look at me like that. You have literally described yourself to me as a feral cat. Don't look at me like that.
Making fun of me.
With your own words. Anyway.
Where was I? What was I talking about? Oh, the Mercer effect, and then not the other bit, but the like don't break the immersion. And like forgetting that you are in fact just you're playing a game, and at any time you can suspend the narrative of that game for a moment to ensure that the integrity of the game that you are playing, the fun that everybody is having is intact.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're allowed to do that, and oftentimes it makes it more fun for everybody.
is kind of a dark analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway because why not? It's like rides at Disney. Okay, the like the customer and like consumer facing part of the rides at Disney is like the narrative, right? Like that's all like the narrative of the ride and like the animatronics and the cool projections and like the effects and all that sort of stuff, right? That's the stuff that like the customers see. But every once in a while, if you do not also have people checking on whether or not that ride is physically safe and functional, everyone's gonna have a bad time. Um and sometimes you can't address it from inside. You have to address it like from the outside, from the structure of the thing, from the superstructure. You cannot only fix the game from inside the game. Like that is like yeah.
Like
Sorry,
what Ike is saying here. Also, I may as well say what happened in my Star Wars game. My players were hired to steal a holocron. They didn't know it was a holocron, and they didn't know the person they were delivering it to was Luke Skywalker. They just knew it would hurt the Empire, so they did it. In the end, they met Luke at the starport and handed off the holocron to him and let him go on his way. But my friend was like, that went okay, but what if one of the players tried to kill him or kidnap him? And I'm like, in that moment, like there are a variety of ways where people on like Reddit or Twitter would be like, oh, you just punish them with the consequences of their actions. Like Luke is a powerful Jedi and he can cut them. I'm like, hold up. There's a really easy solution to this, and it's to fold your DM screen over your notes and say, that's Luke Skywalker. You can't kill him.
Yeah.
That's not a challenge. This isn't me issuing you, the player, a thing that I'm telling you something you literally cannot do in this game.
Yeah. There's also the approach of like, I mean that's absolutely it. That's probably the best way, but there's also the approach of like, if that happened, a very useful tool in a GM's toolbox, which I personally have never used, although there may have been instances where I should have, is to just sort of stop, look around the table and go, are the rest of you okay with this? Like, is this something that you want to have in this game that we are all playing together? Like, very powerful tool. Peer pressure, not always a thing to be ignored.
Yeah,
sometimes you use it. It's a tool sometimes.
Just checking in. Do we all want to murk Luke Skywalker tonight? Or like, do we want to just push quick save and see what happens? Like, we can preserve the narrative and assume that you hand off this holocron if you want to fight Luke Skywalker for the next hour. Like,
yeah, like if you just want to see what would happen, we can suspend that and go on and see what would happen and just like do like non-canon to the game, right? And come back when you all get brutally sliced to pieces, we can go back to the other thing. We can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there's lots of options in those situations, and most of them involve breaking the immersion of the game for a moment and being like, just to be clear.
And then if they were like, yeah, let's do it, I as the GM would absolutely go ahead with it. And then when we came back, I would do some dumb shit like go, you have a brief moment, and like where I would basically describe I would describe them having an intrusive thought basically, and then say, and then in a moment the thought is gone. Like I would describe, you have visions of the battle that would take place, the brutal slaughter of all of you and your companions, and then just like that, the moment passes and you watch the figure walk away.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of weight. Okay, but that sounds sick as hell, actually. Yeah, the more I talk about this, the more like, fuck, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to read what Afro Dutch said, but I think I love that idea. Putting the stakes on the table can really help build the suspense, really turn a good game into a great game. It's like the saying goes, it's not players against the DM, it's the DM. It's players and the DM creating amazing story together. Yeah, like that's whenever somebody asks me like how a role playing game works, who's never played it before, or like people ask about D&D or things like that. My favorite way to talk about game masters as part of the table is just to say, everybody at the table is playing, one person just does it differently. They're fulfilling a different role. Everybody else plays a certain way, and one person's doing something slightly different, but they're still playing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's a cooperative. It's a cooperative act.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, Gemini, hi.
Hi, Gemini. I'm glad you were able to catch some of the stream.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right, Aphrodite. That's exactly it. And like, I think on a surface level, it does kind of seem like preserving the characters won't know what the consequences of their actions are going to be. So why should the players know? And so keeping everything obscured in that way seems at first brush like that's the way to go. And like it would make the stakes higher because they don't know what the consequences of their choices are going to be. But I feel like even literally as I have explained that, just by saying it that way, you can understand why in fact that would not be the case. Why the stakes are actually higher when they do know exactly what will happen when they make their choices. And the thing is, when I was designing it, what I really wanted to have, I wanted an experience to, I wanted the experience to be one where the players, when bad things happened there at the end, at the campaign, they knew that it was because of the choices that they had made, and it was directly tied to the choices they had made, and not because of random die rolls, because that feels like shit. And Gemini. Gemini.
What happened? Oh.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I was reacting to. I was letting you finish your thought, but also, holy shit, Gemini, thank you.
Oh.
Hold on. Hold on, I have a button for this. I have a lever for this. Hold on 1 second. You ready for this?
He's dead. You killed him. He's gone. Deceased. You melted Lucas. This is the Gemini special where it will be a perfectly normal evening of Ramblemancy, and Gemini will coast in and be like,
by the way, just
Gemini.
Thank you so much. It means.
Thank you.
It really means a lot.
And just since you're popping in right now and not at the beginning, I know we're coming up on the end and we'll talk about this again, but we did announce the start date for our next Tomorrow is Dead, which I'm sure you saw in Discord, but October 18th, 6 p.m. Pacific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my god, Gemini, thank you so much. It's all extremely helpful. Like literally everything helps because like there's so like, speaking of, opening the curtains a little bit, in order to make an operation like Rule of Lore run, it requires a lot of other additional sort of tangential services that we need to pay for, and so our upkeep costs can be quite high when looked at as a lump sum. But the reality is that every individual one of those services that we pay for in order to make this happen, like individually aren't that much. And so literally any amount helps. And I always think about it whenever anybody gives us anything. I always think about it in terms of like, oh, that's the amount that covers X thing. That literally covers the payment to X thing this month. Or like that covers this or whatever, right? Like that's how I think about those things. So it's not just like a platitude when a streamer or a content creator of some sort says every little bit helps. We mean it literally. Literally every little bit helps, because even like fucking $10, $5, all of that, like I can think of something that amount would cover, like So
anything from like the Sirenscape for like the cool like sounds and soundscapes and music that you hear during like actual play sessions that we run, or even like I have a passing eye as a graphic designer and I can do some stuff in Clip Studio Paint, but a lot of the cool graphics that I make are things that we source through like some other services that we got. So there's we actually talked about. I think Jake talked about Motion Array on stream. That's where we get a lot of the cool like stock imagery for the like trailers and the promotion material that we make. Like there's tons of like teeny little upkeep costs and stuff like that. So like
yeah, and it all kind of adds up. So yeah. Thank you so much, Gemini. Well, like you have always been a huge supporter, either by your presence or by your generous gifts. You have always been a huge supporter of the channel, and we appreciate it, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I don't remember what we were talking about, so.
And we're closing out too, but what did Jade say? Raid leader is a bit like that. Cooperative gameplay. I'm leading this group through a video game dungeon and guiding them through the mechanics of that dungeon, but I'm also playing through that dungeon my own character too. Yeah, absolutely. And like, Destiny has actually like started introducing something like that for raids too. You can play guided games. So like when you go to pick a raid, there's like an alternate queue, like as opposed to just like the no matchmaking, grab 5 friends, go in yourselves. There's like a queue that you can be like, okay, I want to learn this raid or I want to teach this raid, and it's you know it's kind of the same vibe. Like we're all here. Some of us for different purposes. Like I'm here to help you through this raid, and some people are like, I'm here to learn how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no. Well, this was a conversation that started talking about Baldur's Gate and turned into a whole other thing.
Yeah, well, I knew that because all of us... Oh, my voice cracked. No! I knew that because so many of us were playing Baldur's Gate right now that it's inevitable that thing was going to come up. And I genuinely had some kind of half-formed thoughts about learning new games, because like I play a lot of video games. I'm pretty good at them, but that doesn't mean that when I am introduced to a new genre that I don't have a shitload of stuff to learn how to do.
Absolutely.
And the same is true of just like so many different kinds of games, tabletop RPGs included.
Listen, John, you and your trouble with CRPGs, literally watch me play an action platformer ever.
I understand. Like, I think part of the reason that I like Destiny so much is because I like games like Super Metroid and Hollow Knight and like I think because I like Metroidvanias and like my beginnings as a video gamer are those kinds of like action platformers.
Yeah.
Probably is why I like Destiny so much, because it smooshes together like the puzzle solving aspect, the platforming aspect, and then also like the high action flashy gameplay that I like.
Man,
so
yeah, like literally at some point, remember when I was trying to play Ghost Runner?
Oh man, that was a wild couple of weeks in Discord. You beat it, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I beat it a couple times, twice I think, and I got very close a couple more times, and I just didn't feel like I didn't want to do the final boss again, and so actually there's right before the final boss in Ghost Runner, there's like, or a little bit before the final, there's this whole sequence that it doesn't matter how good I get at the game, I'm always terrible at. Like that specific sequence, and I just didn't feel like I didn't want to do it anymore, so I stopped before the end. But yeah, I beat it a couple times.
Wait, I remember what sequence you're talking about.
It's this whole fucking sequence where you've got to do this, like you've got to run over here, you got to grab this thing, you got to throw that at these guys while you're like